Part 19. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Seong-Lang Go. Chapter 181. Under the blood moon, a black portal suddenly appeared in a valley, and several people fell out of it and fell towards the ground. Emma had begun to adjust her posture in mid-air, but the moment she came out of the portal, she already felt something was wrong. With a high degree of concentration, time seems to gradually slow down. She saw the unconscious Li Anping still falling towards the ground without consciousness, and the man who drilled the ground hugged the goddess tightly and fell towards the ground. Just as the three of them were slowly falling towards the ground, a black shadow rushed towards Emma at an astonishing high speed. Phew! One of Emma's right legs flew into the air, and blood spilled out like a fountain. He didn't even have a second to come out of the space door. The other party sprinted and cut off one of Emma's calves. A few seconds later, the severe pain entered Emma's mind. She lay on the ground and stared at the black shadow. Flying General. At this time, the underground man seemed to realize that they were under attack. He stood in front of Emma and said anxiously, "Boss Emma, are you okay?" He turned his head, looked at the man in front of him and shouted, "You this bastard! It's useless. He has turned into a zombie and has no self-awareness for a long time. Be careful." He was a 5th level ability user in Daxia, a flying general. Emma frowned and endured the pain coming from her lower body. "Pain, help me up." The underground man quickly helped Emma up. At the same time, he was nervously guarding the flying general. No wonder a level 5 ability user could successfully sneak attack Emma. The pale-faced flying general just watched Emma slowly stand up with the help of the underground man. There was a hint of joking in the corner of his mouth. "To be honest, I admire you very much." "Flying General, are you still here?" Emma suddenly shook her head mid-sentence. "No, you are Pluto? Can you control what they say?" "Yes, I am communicating with you now." The flying general nodded and said, "Even a 5th level ability user will give up hope soon after entering the underworld, and finally be slowly fused with the underworld, because this is indeed what makes people fuse with the underworld. Desperate environment. But you have been fighting from the beginning to the end, with no thought of giving up, and you even united a group of subordinates. To be honest, if it hadn't been for Li Anping's appearance, I would have wanted to keep watching to see how long you could hold on. So you haven't really taken action, haven't you? Tried your best to destroy me like you did recently." Emma looked at Li Anping, who was lying on the ground, and suddenly asked, "Li Anping, is this his name? Now that it has reached this point, can you tell me why we started to exterminate the rebels with all our strength because of the appearance of this man?" "Because Li Anping's strength is pretty good. Although he is not as good as me, his combat power has reached the 5th level. 2 guys with 5th level combat power, even if you join together, you still can't defeat me." "But I never like to take risks." After saying that, Flying General snapped his fingers, and vague figures began to appear around him. Countless pale-faced zombies appeared in the sight of Emma and the underground man. They seemed dense and endless, with no end in sight. "You still want to open the space door and escape?" The flying general looked at Emma's solemn expression and smiled disdainfully. "If I didn't want to talk to you more, I could have killed you with that blow just now. Why don't you wonder why I know where you teleported?" "Say what you want to say," Emma said coldly. Flying General smiled and shook his head. "Did you know? In fact, the entire underworld is under my surveillance. I can clearly see your so-called hiding places, bases, and strongholds. You previously left the remaining. The rebels were all arranged in this valley, so I guessed that you would set the teleportation coordinates here, but I guessed it right." Seeing the changed expressions of Emma and the underground man, the flying general smiled very happily. "Is this game fun? Your so-called resistance, so-called resourcefulness, and plans are all wrong in my eyes. If I weren't really bored and wanted to play with you, you wouldn't have had a chance." Emma clenched her fists and looked with a livid face at the flying general, who was laughing back and forth. Her tone was as cold as ice. What happened to Hansen and the others? What did you do to them? They? Are they dead? Flying General shrugged and said calmly, they should all be at the rebirth point now. I will tell you a piece of news for free. Under my control, they are all at the same time now rebirth at a rebirth point. I'm really sorry. I never told you. In fact, I can control the number and location of the rebirth point. Now it is surrounded by countless zombies, sandstorm, and wolf. I'm afraid they are constantly being killed. Then it merged into the underworld. If it weren't for the fact that operating so many people at the same time consumes so much of my energy, you would have no chance to resist. But it's good this way, I can let you relieve my boredom. The rebels on Hades, their desperate resistance, are nothing more than a game to Hades. But there is always a bottom line in Hades. As long as the threat of the rebels exceeds this line, Pluto will clean up the entire Hades. Obviously, Li Anping's arrival made Pluto feel that he had reached this line. Seeing the ponytailed girl clenching her silver teeth with a look of hatred on her face, the flying general felt more and more happy. After all, he had been playing this game for so long, and he had been waiting for this woman. You have to die more than 100 times before you can completely merge into the underworld, right? The flying general laughed morbidly, and couldn't help licking his lips and said, don't worry, we have plenty of time, I will take good care of you. You can run as hard as you can, I'm afraid you will be alone next time. The underworld is so big, how long can you run away? But the next moment, the flying general frowned and looked behind Emma, where a man was slowly getting up from the ground. As he stood up, Li Anping slowly said, indeed, the underworld is so big, how long can you run away? Hades. The flying general looked down on him, Li Anping, you can't even beat Zhurong and the blood demon, and you were beaten unconscious. Do you think you can deal with me now by joining forces with Emma? I just hope your resistance can provide me with more fun. Li Anping, Emma said this strange name in her mouth, looking at the man who finally woke up from his coma. It's a pity that it's meaningless. From the beginning to the end, this man had no idea how to leave the underworld. The so-called concern of Hades was just that the other party wanted to take precautions before it happened. And a level 4 ability user, even if he had the combat power comparable to that of a level 5 ability user as Hades said, was only limited in strength. No need to join forces. Li Anping's eyes fell on the face of the flying general, I will kill you like slaughtering chickens and dogs. Humph! The flying general just snorted coldly, and the next moment his face changed wildly, and a fist appeared in front of him as if teleporting. With a puff, the head of the flying general exploded like a watermelon, and white and red liquids were scattered all over the ground like dice. Li Anping retracted his fist covered with blood and murmured, although the power is still at the 5th energy level, it has lost self-awareness and is too weak. With a thump, the body of the flying general fell straight to the ground. The whole audience was silent. Time goes back to 2 hours ago. The streets of Morocco are particularly deserted today. Most residents have received the news that they will have a day off at home. The streets are full of fully armed soldiers. Today is the day for the three-party talks between Ice Castle, Daxia, and the Star Alliance to gradually sign an armistice agreement. For Daxia, it may be a surrender agreement. Under the escort of the army, black cars sent guests from various countries to the front of the St. Paul Palace. This peace meeting was held here. In the center of the St. Palace is Morocco's famous architectural attraction, the National Assembly Hall. Over the past few hundred years, countless major events that have affected Ice Castle have been decided in this conference hall. Today, this conference hall has been renovated and upgraded. There are more than 1,000 seats in the semicircular conference space, and it is equipped with two-way simultaneous interpretation facilities in 16 languages. At this time, guests from various countries have walked into the conference hall one after another and sat down. There are several documents on the table in front of the seats, which records some of the topics of today's meeting. Li Qian is sitting in her seat and flipping through these documents. After witnessing Roland's death that night, she returned to the room alone, and no one else from the Great Xia Dragon Bird knew what happened that night. But everyone found that Li Qian seemed different. Not only did she break through to the second energy level, but she also became colder than her lively appearance. No matter who she looked at, her eyes were as calm as a well. It was as if she had changed into a different person overnight. Around Li Qian, other members of the Great Xia Dragon Bird were sitting. They were either playing with their phones, or in a daze, or chatting. Only a few, such as Lu Shen, Yang Guang, and others, were looking through the documents on the table. But the more they looked, the deeper their brows frowned. The currently drafted peace agreement is completely tilted towards the Ice Castle and the Star Alliance. Once the Great Xia signed this agreement, not only would the Great Xia Dragon Bird be shattered, but all kinds of potential ability users would be divided up by the Ice Castle and the Star Alliance. Not only that, the content of this agreement is so harsh that, apart from the problem of the ability users, once it is fully implemented, it will be enough to make Daxia's economy and military regress by more than 10 years, and open all these things to the Star Alliance and Ice Castle. If this shit is really signed, it won't take many years for Daxia to be completely divided by the Star Alliance and Ice Castle. Lu Shen gritted his teeth. But even so, he had no way out. The strength difference is too great. It can be said that whether it is the Star Alliance or the Ice Castle, as long as they send a level 5 ability user at random, they can defeat Daxia. Faced with this situation, what else can they do except sign the agreement? I am the fish on the chopping board. Lu Sheng sighed. I don't know what Wang Chong is going to do. What else can we plan? The 9 royal families have given up on us a long time ago. Qian Duoduo sneered on the side. After speaking, he looked at the other side of the venue, where a group of middle-aged men and old men were slowly walking into the venue. It was a group of people from the 9 royal families headed by Wang Chong. After entering the venue, they didn't even look at Lu Shen, and sat down directly according to the seat arrangement. If you look down from the podium at the front of the conference hall, you can clearly see that the Great Xia Dragon Bird on the far left and the other participants around it are like an invisible barrier, and all the positions close to the Great Xia Dragon Bird are vacant. At this moment, no one is willing to get close to the Great Xia Dragon Bird. They are even afraid that some unnecessary closeness will cause misunderstandings from the Flame Dragon Vanguard and the Star Alliance. The Great Xia Dragon Bird, which used to roam the East Continent, has now become a lamb to be slaughtered in the eyes of everyone. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 182. Located in the corner of the conference hall, 2 men, one old and one young, were sitting quietly on chairs. The younger boy looked at the documents on the table and threw them away after a while. He gloated, "Is Daxia Longke finished this time? Who told them to be so overbearing? That Li Anping is such a fool. He actually ran to Morocco and threw himself into a trap. If he escaped from Daxia alone, he would still be a fool. I can survive for a while longer." The old man on the side coughed and said with a serious face, "Don't talk too much, don't worry about Daxia Longke. The main reason I brought you here this time is to let you make friends with some powerful people. Especially the Star Alliance and Yan Big Shot of Dragon Pioneer." While an old man and a young man were talking, a large group of people came into the conference room. They looked proud, had strong backs, and were all wearing traditional clothes. They are the royal family of Baiyu Kingdom. The leader is Baiyu Emperor Kailan King. Did he even come? The middle-aged man who took the lead had a beard on his face and looked very strong. His muscles stood out like marbles, and even his clothes couldn't cover them. His eyes were full of arrogance, looking at the people in the conference room, as if an emperor was inspecting the people. Looking at the surprised faces of everyone in the conference room, as well as the Daxia Longke hiding in a corner, A contemptuous smile flashed across his lips, but this smile came and went even faster, and no one noticed it. Kylan Dynasty said to a young man next to him, although there are many people in this conference room, they are all mediocre people. The main people you need to pay attention to for a while are 5 people, Pluto, Zurong, White Dwarf, and Ma Meng, and Yulia. These 5 people are the key to this meeting and how I will develop in the future. My child understands. After the royal family of Bio Kingdom took their seats, a large number of people came in one after another, including leaders from Yingxi and Fulun, as well as people with military abilities, envoys from Dongyang, important cotters from Ice Castle, and so on. 10 minutes later, there was a sudden commotion outside the door. At the same time, most of the capable people in the conference hall couldn't help but look in the direction of the door. Kylan King murmured, "These 2 powerful thoughts are coming from the Star Alliance." Yajiao and other Daxia Longke people also looked in the direction of the gate. Yan Bei sneered, "What an arrogant thought." Qianduoduo sighed, "This is a demonstration to us. Let us not resist weakly." After a while, the door was opened again. 2 men and 1 woman walked in slowly. There were very few people sent by the Star Alliance this time, only 3 people, namely Mammon, Yulia, and Blumen. Shang Zhenhai, who was also going to come, decided to continue to follow the alliance leader after learning that Li Anping was dead. Further education. Although there were only 3 people, no one present would look down upon them because of their small number. 2 level 5 ability users, or 2 level 5 ability users who have experienced hundreds of battles and are famous far and wide. Who dares to look down on them? When Mammon and Yulia appeared at the gate, all the ability users present couldn't help but look at them, as if they were the only protagonists of this meeting. That look contained all kinds of looks such as admiration, respect, fear, etc. Mammon and Yulia were already used to these looks, but it was the first time for Blumen to enjoy such looks from such a big shot. Looking at him, although he knew clearly that these eyes were not for him, he still couldn't help but feel a little carried away. Suddenly, he turned his gaze to where Daxia Longke was, and the viciousness in his eyes was revealed without reservation. This made most of the ability users in Daxia Longke feel uneasy. If it weren't for Lu Sheng, Yang Guang, Qianduoduo, Sun Hao, and other senior figures who had been sitting in charge, I'm afraid they would have found an opportunity to slip away. When the 3 powerful men from the Star Alliance took their seats, the entire conference hall became quiet, and all seats were basically filled. Some people who were still speaking in low voices also closed their mouths under inexplicable pressure. Everyone was waiting quietly for the curtain to open. The atmosphere in the entire venue was so solemn that it seemed like water could drip from it. 10 minutes later, the door to the conference hall opened again, and a group of people filed in. The key figures of Ice Castle are finally here. Walking at the front was Pluto, who had black hair and black eyes and was dressed in a white military uniform. Side by side with him was an old man in gorgeous clothes and a crown on his head. He is the current emperor of Ice Castle, Ivan II. He is also the head of one of the 4 noble families of Ice Castle. Calculating, he and the Blood Demon are of the same generation, but because they are incompetent, they look older. But no one here dared to look down upon him. This man stepped out from the flames of war and ascended to the position of emperor step by step with the power of a mortal. In a certain way, he might be more terrifying than some people with abilities. Walking behind Pluto and Ivan II was Zurong, who had hair like flames. He was half a step behind and followed closely behind the 2 of them. The obedience he showed shocked countless people secretly. The young and old couple in the corner were extremely surprised. The young man wondered, is this Zurong? He was very arrogant back then. Why are he so obedient today? The old man sighed, oh, this really shows how terrifying Pluto is. If a person like Zurong is not someone who can absolutely subdue him in terms of strength, it is absolutely impossible for him to obey like this. Xin Long, you have to observe him carefully. This man has a huge impact on the future development of our Yukideo, and even affects our life and death. On the other side, King Kylan stared at Hades closely, and whispered, "This man is getting more and more terrifying. Compared to when I saw him 3 years ago, he seems to have become much stronger." "Father, this time we?" asked the young man on the side. "Let's wait and see." With the Star Alliance and the Flame Dragon Vanguard leading the way, the trend is irreversible. Kylan King side, watch everything that happens next carefully, witness the decline of the behemoth Daxia Dragon Bird, and the strong rise of Hades, which will be of great help to your future growth. The young man nodded, and suddenly asked hesitantly, "Father, I wonder who is stronger between Hades and you?" Kylan King smiled bitterly, "Although we are both at the 5th energy level, I can only dominate the southern border at most, while Hades may be the strongest in the East continent. Maybe, he will be the second person to reach the 6th energy level after the leader of the Star Alliance, and he will be the symbol of leading the East continent to fight against the countries of the West continent and the Star Alliance in the future." The young man was shocked. He didn't expect that his father's evaluation of Hades was so high, far exceeding his psychological expectations. Without mentioning the whispers of the people under the seat, Hades and his party walked to the front row on their own. Leng Shuang, who was behind Zhu Rong, smiled cruelly at Zhu Rong of Daxia Longke while walking. It made Lu Sheng and others look even uglier. And Hades kept smiling from beginning to end, and seemed to be in a very good mood. Naturally, the people present did not know that at this moment, Hades was doing two things at the same time, controlling the zombie army in the underworld and killing the rebels and the living dead. He even separated a consciousness to control the flying general and wantonly humiliated Emma, the leader of the rebels. So he was in a very good mood all the time. But in the next moment, Hades suddenly changed his face and stopped. As the focus of everyone's attention, Hades' abnormality at this moment immediately attracted everyone's attention. Just when people felt strange, Hades had restored his smile and walked again. But this smile did not last long and disappeared again. Next, Hades performed a face-changing show. First, his face turned livid, then pale, and finally, his face changed drastically, full of fear. This time, no one could hold back. Zhu Rong was the first to rush up. "My lord, what happened to you?" Ivan too frowned and asked, "General, are you okay? Do you want to go to the hospital?" The people below also began to whisper. "What happened to Hades? Is he sick?" But Hades' face became more and more ugly. Zhu Rong supported him and felt that his arm was shaking constantly. "My lord, you... How could it be?" Hades' body shook more and more, and his eyes were full of disbelief and fear. "My lord? What did you say?" Zhu Rong asked with some doubt. "Quick, quick," Hades said intermittently, and the people around him all listened quietly to the words of this extremely powerful man. "Run." When Hades said these two words, there was a puff of blood, and a strong arm broke out from Hades' chest. A cry of surprise rang out, and Hades looked at the arm with despair on his face, muttering, he rushed out. Everyone looked at Hades in surprise, at a loss. No one present could have imagined that most of them had reached the last moment of their lives. When the unprecedented monster broke out of the cage, everyone's life was no longer in their own hands. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 183. Time went back to a few minutes ago, when Li Enping punched the flying general in the underworld and looked at the blood moon in the sky. He felt that Hades was there. He could hear and feel that a powerful force was brewing there. But before killing Hades, he still had some things to do. With the help of the goddess, Li Enping woke up again, but even he himself couldn't figure out what happened in the end. But one thing that can be confirmed is that at this time, he has been completely transformed. First of all, the physical fitness has reached the terrifying strength of 22.9, speed of 21.8, and physical fitness of 23.8. Among them, the strength has increased by 3.1, the speed has increased by 2.8, and the physical fitness has increased by 3.3. And Li Anping clearly felt that when the three attributes of strength, speed, and physical fitness all exceeded 20, his combat effectiveness had completely reached another level. In other words, that is already another dimension of strength. Although he was still at the fourth energy level, it was no longer the same as when he killed the blood demon. The so-called fifth energy level was no longer powerful in his eyes at this moment. Li Anping felt that he could crack the earth with a stamp of his feet and tear the sky with a punch. He was not used to this illusion of powerful power constantly overflowing from his body. In addition, during Li Anping's thoughts, a black incarnation of thought energy floated behind him. Li Anping felt that he could control this incarnation of mind energy at will. Is this the new change after the ability reaches the fourth level? Li Anping took away the incarnation of his mind energy, and saw the incarnation dissipated in the air in an instant. We don't have time to study this now. He turned his head, and then appeared in front of Emma and the underground man as if teleporting. When I was unconscious, I could detect the outside world, and I knew everything. Next I will break through the underworld, but if you don't want to go out without a leg, you'd better commit suicide and be reborn. Huh? Emma was stunned and questioned, you know how to leave the underworld? No, you mean break away? Yes, I will completely destroy this place next. Li Anping said calmly, you should die once. Protect yourself after you are resurrected. After saying that, he pointed at Emma in front of him. It means the speed is so fast that no one has time to react. In the surprised eyes of the underground man and Emma, Li Anping's index finger pierced Emma's forehead with a pop, and a gap was opened in the back of Emma's head, and blood spurted out to the back of her head like spring water. The ponytail girl fell to the ground with a dull look on her face. After Li Anping confirmed that she was dead, he nodded. The underground man said angrily, what are you doing? She saved you. How could you kill her? Isn't it possible to be reborn in the underworld? I just let her go out with an intact body. The underground man was stunned. Although what Li Anping said made sense, he still found it difficult to accept the fact that the other party killed Emma once. But Li Anping didn't bother to pay attention to what he thought. With Emma's ability and experience, there would be absolutely no danger in a short period of time after her body recovered. So what he will do next? Li Anping was seen squatting down in the direction of the blood moon, with all four limbs lying on the ground at the same time. Then his body shook, and the muscles all over his body, especially his hands and feet, swelled as if they were inflated. Infinite power was transmitted from his limbs to the ground. Even if Li Anping didn't move, there were already hundreds of cracks on the ground with him. Center, spreading out in all directions. Under the gaze of the underground man and countless zombies, Li Anping thrust his limbs downwards, and with a loud bang, his whole body soared into the sky like a rocket. The place where he originally prostrate continued to collapse, forming a huge depression. After this forceful jump, Li Anping brought up a wave of air and flew several kilometers in the direction of the blood moon in the blink of an eye. The underground man stared at him from below, but found that the opponent was flying faster than he could turn his neck. The speed is still fast. Just when this jump was exhausted and Li Anping's speed gradually slowed down in mid-air, there was a bang, and air waves appeared under Li Anping's feet. He had already accelerated towards the blood moon again. The pedaling speed of his feet reached more than 5 times the speed of sound in an instant, and the air almost turned into a solid state at this moment, providing huge thrust for every step of Li Anping. There seemed to be a series of crackling thunder in the sky. In the blink of an eye, Li Anping was only a few hundred meters away from the blood moon. It turns out that the blood moon on this underworld is only a dozen kilometers high, and the radius of the blood moon itself is about the length of a playground. Looking at the blood moon getting closer and closer to him in the sky, Li Anping showed a cruel smile, and heard him shout, "Pluto, get out of here." Then, Li Anping, who was in mid-air, punched the blood moon fiercely. The terrifying punch force smashed everything and destroyed the void and hit the blood moon hard. Wherever it passed, all the air was expelled. Open, forming a pseudo-vacuum state. Now if Zhurong receives a punch from Li Anping like this again, I am afraid that the punch will directly bring out the flames and kill him with one punch. At this time, Li Anping's strength has reached the sky. He can produce great power with any punch or kick. He is like a god and demon, unstoppable. There was a loud bang. The fist hit the blood moon hard, splashing countless dust. Just hearing the impact sound was like a tens of thousands of tons of bombs exploding. The whole sky seemed to be trembling with this terrible force. The next second, a huge crash sounded throughout the underworld at the speed of sound. The invisible force radiated in all directions with the blood moon as the center, tearing all the dark clouds in the sky into pieces. At this moment, the entire underworld was cloudless. But after enduring such a terrifying and domineering punch, the blood moon in the sky was intact except for large pieces of dust falling from the surface. It was a red crystal substance, flashing a bewitching red light, and it seemed that it was not affected by the punch at all. At this time, Hades' arrogant voice rang out, "Don't waste your energy, Li Anping. This blood moon is the gap between the entire underworld and the real world. Without my permission, nothing can pass through. It is the power of space. Do you understand? No matter how strong and powerful your power is, it is impossible to break the space. The only thing you can do is to die of exhaustion, starvation, and old age in the underworld until you are fused with the underworld." Li Anping did not speak. He just stepped on the void again and jumped directly to dozens of meters above the blood moon. Hades sneered, "It's useless. Your ability is pure physical attack. It's impossible to open the blood moon." Li Anping exhaled deeply, and then used the burst state. He saw that his whole body grew bigger again. The muscles all over his body swelled as if they were about to explode. The blue veins bulged out like steel bars. His height also grew to a height of 2 meters and 5 at this moment. Then he punched the blood moon under his feet again. This punch was twice as powerful as the previous one. The atmosphere was screaming and the sky was shaking. The fist hit the blood moon head-on, making a loud noise like a tsunami, and even the entire blood moon seemed to sink several meters. Within 100 miles of the underworld, everyone heard the second thunder explosion, and then their feet shook with the ground, as if the entire underworld was shaking. But after this punch, the blood moon still looked intact. Hades said in fear, "Are you crazy? Even if you try your best, it is absolutely impossible." Before Hades could speak, his voice was directly drowned out by Li Anping's third punch. In this punch, Li Anping gathered all his mental energy from his body. The black mental energy gathered on his right fist like a black hole, and with a desperate force, he smashed towards the blood moon again with the momentum of opening up the world. The Hades hiding in the blood moon, watching Li Anping's punch, almost stopped the blood from flowing. The terrifying power came from all directions, and it seemed that even the space was frozen. The power of this punch has exceeded the limit that mortals can imagine. Wherever the fist passed, there was a continuous sound of crackling, as if the space was broken and everything was destroyed. After this punch hit the blood moon, there was no more loud noise. The world within 100 miles seemed to be holding its breath for this shocking blow. In this strange silence, no one could know how strong and terrible Li Anping's punch was. But the silence could not last forever. The maximum output of mental energy plus the maximum output of physical strength, this punch even exceeded the limit of Li Anping's own power. After hitting the target, the brute force that was enough to overturn the river and the sea finally erupted like a volcano. Boom 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 boom. A shocking sound came, which was completely unimaginable and beyond imagination. Under Li Anping's punch, it seemed that even space, time, and all the matter in the world were struggling and shattered in this pure power. On the ground more than 10 kilometers below the blood moon, the aftermath of the fist force alone directly tore the earth apart, creating a large pit of tens of meters. If the earth, which was more than 10 kilometers away from the punch, was like this, what about the blood moon? The blood moon in the air began to develop deep cracks from the place where the fist hit, and it seemed to break the entire blood moon into pieces. No, with the screams of Hades, the cracks on the blood moon became longer and longer. In the underworld, at this moment, all the rebels and the living dead at the rebirth point stopped fighting and looked at the blood moon in the sky. Even the zombies stopped fighting and looked at the blood moon under the influence of Hades. The three loud noises just now had completely shocked the rebels and the living dead, but they were not as good as what they saw at this moment, the scene that was like a myth. Even on the ground, they could see with their naked eyes that the cracks on the blood moon were getting bigger and bigger, and the whole moon seemed to be broken into pieces in the next moment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 184. Stop. You madman. You will completely destroy the underworld, and you won't be able to get out by then. Listening to Pluto's frightened voice, Li Anping just smiled disdainfully and raised his fist again, with waves of black light rising above it. In just a few seconds after throwing the third punch and regaining his breath, waves of thought energy were continuously transmitted from the incarnation of thought energy into his body. Li Anping felt that the thought energy had recovered by 20 to 30%. Is this also one of the functions of the incarnation of mind energy? Thinking of this, Li Anping clenched his fist hard and focused all his energy on his fist again. A black hole-like light wave rose from his arm again. With this punch, he was going to smash the blood moon into pieces in one breath. But at this moment, Li Anping suddenly turned his head and looked below the blood moon. A large yellow cloud was approaching quickly. No, it was not a yellow cloud, but a sandstorm composed of countless yellow sand, rolling towards the sky in the direction of Li Anping. With Li Anping's eyesight, he could still see two people faintly visible in the yellow sand. Wolf and the Admiral, Li Anping sneered, then didn't move his fists, but took a deep breath. A strong wind instantly blew up around him. Li Anping sucked in countless air, and his chest expanded visibly to the naked eye. When he took this breath in, Li Anping spit out violently in the direction where the sand flew, and let out an earth-shattering roar. Go away, go away, go away, go away. The entire underworld suddenly became turbulent, and the colors of the mountains and rivers changed. Huge air currents and sound waves visible to the naked eye hit the sand cloud like a storm. Bang 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 bang. The condensed sand in the sky burst upon contact, and was immediately dispersed by the roar, falling towards the ground. For a moment, it seemed like yellow rain began to fall in the sky. Wolf and the flying general who had been hiding in the sand were bleeding from all their orifices at this moment, swaying amidst the roar and falling towards the ground. In this roar, Li Anping used up all the power of his internal organs. Whether it was the power of airflow or sound waves, it was enough to make mountains and rivers roll back and the stars and moon shift. Not only were the three level 5 ability users knocked back by him in an instant, but the blood moon under his feet was also crumbling. The surface of the blood moon was completely covered with countless cracks, and it was constantly swaying in the terrifying sound waves and air currents, like a rock in a storm. Yabianzhou could be destroyed at any time. At this time, the Nian Qi in Li Anping's body has recovered to about 70% under the transmission of the Nian Qi incarnation. On his clenched fists, the Nian Qi is as thick as ink, and the dark color throughout his body is like the deepest depth in the universe. The black hole is brewing astonishing destructive power. Seeing this, Pluto in the blood moon panicked and shouted, "Stop Li Anping, I'll let you out, I'll let you out. Don't mess around again. A sneer flashed across Li Enping's lips, but he ignored it, and his fist hit the blood moon at his feet like a meteor. 5 minutes ago. On the ground, Hansen punched several times in the air, and the purple light he fired directly tore into pieces the hundreds of zombies in front of him. But soon more zombies came up. His head was covered in sweat. Is it over? My number of rebirths is almost exhausted. Roger on the side smiled nervously and said, it's over, we're all done. No matter how I die, I will be reborn in this place again and again. The surroundings are also surrounded by an army of zombies. We are dead this time. In addition to the two of them, there are about 100 other rebels who are still fighting surrounded by the zombie army, but no matter how many zombies they kill, these zombies will immediately resurrect at this rebirth point. Looking from the sky, the number of zombies has not decreased at all. The resistance army's physical strength, mental energy, and spirit are all limited. They are often torn into pieces by the zombies that surround them accidentally, and then they are reborn and go into battle again. But there is a limit to the number of times they can be reborn. As time goes by, their numbers are getting smaller and smaller, and their morale is getting lower and lower. Where is the leader? Where is the leader? Why don't you come to us, Chief? Why do we keep reborn in the same place? Crying, roaring, despair, and giving up. As more and more rebels are integrated into Hades, more and more people give up and despair. Even Hansen, who was the most determined to resist, had a hint of dejection in his eyes. It's really over. As he sighed inwardly, his legs softened. After exhausting his strength and energy, he fell to his knees. A large wave of zombies rushed up and completely submerged him. Heartbreaking pain came. When Hansen came back to his senses, he knew that he had been reborn. He mustered up his energy and jumped up from the ground. Hansen, who was preparing to fight, saw an incredible scene. The zombies around him stopped attacking for some reason. They all stood there blankly, looking in the direction of the blood moon. What's wrong? Hansen asked in surprise. I don't know. Rogel on the side also shook his head. They suddenly stopped attacking. Because he went to find Hades. Emma's voice suddenly sounded in everyone's ears. Chief, everyone gathered around her. Hansen said anxiously, Chief, why are you here too? Could it be? Emma shook her head and looked around. There were only 70 people left in the resistance army that had not yet been integrated. Adding in the living dead, there were only more than 100 people in total. She sighed, looked at the blood moon in the sky, and whispered, all we can do now is to wait quietly for the result of this battle. At this moment, a loud noise suddenly came to everyone's ears. What's that sound? Is it thundering? Have all the dark clouds in the sky disappeared? What's going on? Hansen looked at the blood moon in the sky in confusion. At this moment, Hawkeye on the side screamed, and his pupils kept shrinking, and his fingers trembled as he pointed at the blood moon in the sky. There is a man on the blood moon. How is it possible? Who is on it? Is it Pluto? No. Hawkeye squinted his eyes and used all his ability to look at the blood moon. The distance of more than 10 kilometers was constantly getting closer. He suddenly shouted, it's that man, the newcomer who has been unconscious. He seems to be attacking the blood moon. Just when the word newcomer entered everyone's mind, a roar that was even more terrifying than before sounded above their heads. Not only was there a huge noise, the ground beneath their feet was also shaking. Everyone looked at the blood moon, and it seemed that the entire underworld was shaking continuously with the loud noise just now. Many people were directly knocked to the ground, and large groups of zombies also fell directly to the ground and could not get up for a while. The whole scene looked like an earthquake. At the same time, more than 1,000 meters away from the rebels, countless yellow sands rushed into the sky, and Wolf and the flying general followed the yellow sands and rushed towards the blood moon in the sky. Hawkeye pointed at the blood moon in the sky with disbelief and shouted, "That man is attacking the blood moon." The sound just now was the sound of that man attacking the blood moon. He is hitting it with his fist. Suddenly, looking at the yellow sand rising into the sky, he shouted again, "It's Sandstorm and the others. They are going to stop that man. How is it possible? What kind of attack would cause such a big momentum? That man is not at the fourth energy level, and his fist will shake the entire underworld. Impossible." Rajal looked at the sky in disbelief. How can there be such a monster? Sandstorm and the others are also there. He is dead. Emma frowned and wanted to use her ability to rush over to organize Sandstorm and the others. But before she could act, a black sun lit up in the sky, followed by a third loud noise. The explosion that sounded like the destruction of the world sounded in the sky, followed by a series of devastating loud noises. The rebels only felt a series of earthquakes, and it seemed that even the space of the underworld was making a sound of collapse. At the same time, a deep crack appeared in the blood moon in the sky, as if it was torn apart by someone. The crack was so deep that even all the rebels on the ground could see it clearly. Everyone held their breath and looked at the terrible scene in the sky. This mythical battle has deeply shocked them. Rajal looked at the sky with fear on his face, Hansen's mouth opened in disbelief, and Emma's eyes were full of excitement. At this moment, there was silence all around, and everyone looked at the blood moon silently, even though all of them except Hawkeye could not see the specific situation clearly. It was as if there was an invisible pressure urging them to look and wait for the result of this battle. Then they heard a shout, and after a series of rolling words, the sand sea that flew into the air rolled back, like a sand rain. Then a black sun lit up in the sky again, and the hearts of all the people on the earth suddenly tightened, and then after a loud bang, they kept hearing the sound of crackling in their ears, and it sounded like the space around them was constantly breaking. The blood moon in the sky completely disintegrated after the loud noise, turning into countless fragments and falling toward the ground. The disintegration of this blood moon also represented that the world of the underworld was about to collapse. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong-Lang Go. Chapter 185. The collapse of the blood moon finally opened the way for Li Anping to the real world. So in the venue, when the chest of Hades was broken by a strong and powerful hand, a man slowly crawled out of the chest of Hades. The chest of Hades looked like a passage to an unknown world. But at this moment, he was spitting blood and foaming at the mouth, and his face was full of pain, which looked very uncomfortable. Because the real Hades was also blasted to pieces when Li Anping smashed the blood moon. At this time, the Hades in the real world was just a puppet, and was gradually decomposing with the collapse of the underworld. But Zhu Rong didn't know this. Seeing Li Anping's upper body appear on the chest of Hades, although he didn't know what was going on, he still shouted and sprayed thousands of degrees of flames at Li Anping with his palm. Facing the flames coming towards him, Li Anping simply waved his hand with an empty palm, not only directly extinguishing the incoming flames with one palm, but also the white air shock wave directly hit Zhu Rong's body. A series of crackling explosions came from Zhu Rong's body. He didn't know how many bones were broken. He spit out blood and flew more than 10 meters away, crashing through the wall. Then there were more than 10 consecutive booms. Zhu Rong had crashed through more than 10 walls and flew directly to the square outside the venue. In the few seconds when everyone was stunned, Li Anping had already hit Zhu Rong with a palm, and he didn't know whether he was dead or alive. Then he pressed his hands on the body of Hades, as if he wanted to break himself out of some unknown space. The puppet Hades was like a broken puppet, his body kept disintegrating, the hole in his chest was getting bigger and bigger, and Li Anping's body was crawling out of it inch by inch. All the people of Daxia Longke stood up and looked at Li Anping with warm eyes, especially Li Qian, who burst into tears and stared at the familiar and reliable figure with red eyes. "My lord is not dead." Under the protection of his men, Ivan too looked at Li Anping, who crawled out of Hades' body and quickly retreated towards the gate. The remaining members of the Yanlong vanguard surrounded Hades and Li Enping, but no one dared to take action. All the people present stood up and stared at the man who looked like a devil crawling out of hell. Kailan King looked at Li Enping in disbelief. What's going on? Is this Li Enping? A young man named Yuer beside him said in surprise, Father, what's going on? Was Hades killed by Li Enping? Yilishan looked at Li Enping in shock. It turned out that with just one strike, Zhurong's life or death is unknown. Can the power of the empty palm reach this level? It's just like the main gun of a battleship. At this moment, Li Enping grabbed Hades' body with both hands and tore it hard, tearing the opponent in half, and his body escaped at once. Not only that, countless figures suddenly emerged from Hades' body. In just a few seconds, more than 100 people suddenly appeared in the venue. Emma, Hansen, Rajal, and others looked at the venue and the outside world, and burst into tears. Finally out. We finally got out. Ha 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 ha, I'm back again. Seeing this group of people crying with joy, Li Enping shouted impatiently, shut up. He looked at Emma and pointed in the direction of the great Xia dragon bird, you stay with them and protect them. Seeing Li Enping in the crowd, these rebels and the living dead were instantly startled. Most of them recognized Li Enping, especially just now in the underworld, listening to Hawkeye and Emma telling them that Li Enping blew up the blood moon in the sky, drove away the sandstorm, killed Hades, and liberated them. At this time, they were completely more afraid of Li Enping than grateful. As soon as they heard Li Enping speak, they immediately followed Emma to the direction of the great Xia dragon bird like wilted chickens. Emma was very obedient when she heard Li Enping's order, and immediately ordered everyone to stand with Daxia Lonke. As for Daxia Lonke, although Lu Sheng, Li Qian, and others wanted to ask Li Enping what was going on, they also knew that now was not the time. Because at this moment, everyone in the venue except Daxia Lonke was staring at Li Enping like a group of jackals. The atmosphere of the battle was about to break out. At this time, some ordinary leaders including Ivan Tu had taken advantage of the time just now to leave the venue quickly and quietly. Among them were the 9 royal families of Daxia, Wang Chong, Li Wei, and others, who also looked at Li Enping, who they thought was dead, with fear on their faces and fled with Ivan Tu. Li Enping just glanced at them and said nothing. He didn't know what the situation was at the moment, but there were at least 3 level 5 ability users in the entire venue. They were different from the flying generals and sandstorms in the underworld, but they did not lose their intelligence and their strength was greatly damaged. Under unknown circumstances, Li Enping did not choose to fight them directly. After the ordinary people left, all the people left in the venue were ability users. Among them, Mammon and Yulia from the Star Alliance were the leaders. They looked at Li Enping with complicated expressions. Behind them, Blumen looked angry and stared at Li Enping with a vicious look. But he was afraid that Li Enping would find him, so he could only hide carefully behind the 2 level 5 ability users. This feeling made him feel very depressed. But Li Enping didn't take them seriously. He just stayed there, quietly waiting for Daxia Lonke and Emma to join together. But even though he just stood there without any action, no one dared to move. They were not idiots. Li Enping destroyed Hades and Zhurong as soon as he appeared. His strength was obvious to all. Who dared to be the first to stand out at this time? Seeing that everyone was standing together, Li Enping said to Emma again, can they all be teleported away? Emma whispered, no, I lack coordinates and vision. After that, she glanced at everyone in the venue, especially Mammon, Yulia, and Kailan King, who all gave him a very, very dangerous feeling. At this moment, Leng Shuang in the Flame Dragon Vanguard finally couldn't help it. He said loudly, Li Enping, do you want to just leave like this? Today is the day when Daxia and Ice Castle signed a ceasefire agreement. You assassinated the leader of our Flame Dragon Vanguard and caused such a bad impact. You still want to leave? Today, Lord Mammon and Lady Yulia of the Star Alliance are here. Do you think you can just leave like this? Oh. Truce agreement. Li Anping heard what Leng Shuang said, and suddenly turned his head to look at an empty place. This glance made other people confused, but Leng Shuang was immediately scared. His visual misalignment ability can make others unable to detect his real location. It is precisely because of this ability that he dared to stand up and speak first. Who knew that Li Anping heard him speak and directly looked at his real body? Then the next moment, Li Anping took a step forward. Leng Shuang only felt a black shadow flash in front of him, and he was grabbed by Li Anping's neck. His face was flushed. He wanted to speak, but Li Anping's hand pinched his trachea tightly, and he couldn't say a word. In the eyes of the people around him, they could only see Li Anping appear in an open space as if teleporting, and then stretched out his hand and grabbed a man. Li Anping didn't even look at Leng Shuang, but asked Lu Sheng, "Lu Sheng, what is this armistice agreement?" Lu Sheng shouted, "It is a treaty that the Star Alliance and Ice Castle forced us to sign." Although Lu Sheng didn't say anything specific, the word forced was enough to explain everything. Li Anping looked coldly at the Flame Dragon vanguards who wanted to go up but didn't dare to go up, the ability users of various countries who were ready to move, and the solemn-looking Star Alliance and Bio country. Everyone was touched by his eyes, and felt like being poured with a basin of cold water, and their souls trembled constantly. Mammon finally couldn't help but say, "Li Anping, I know that there are big conflicts between your Daxia Dragon Bird and the Flame Dragon Vanguard, but this armistice agreement is the intention of the leader. Since the Hades is dead, the specific content of the agreement can also be modified." His words were not clear, but the meaning was clear. Since the only level 6 ability user, the Queen of Heaven, was pulled out as a backer, it also hinted to Li Anping that since the Hades was dead, the positions of Daxia and the Ice Castle could be switched. Although the tone was a bit hard, it also showed the weakness in his heart. Obviously, Li Anping's performance just now really scared him. Whether it was him or Yulia, at this moment, they were not 100% sure to defeat Li Anping in front of them. So Mammon hoped to stabilize the opponent and retreat unscathed, and wait until he really figured out Li Anping's strengths and weaknesses, or the Star Alliance sent reinforcements, and then deal with Li Anping. Li Anping smiled coldly. He glanced at the people around him. Bio Country, Fulun, Yingxi, Yukidao, Yanlong Vanguard, Xing Meng, all the capable people present felt as if they were being looked at by the god of death. The terrifying pressure came from Li Anping's body, making their hearts beat faster and faster. He stretched out his hand and broke Leng Shuang's neck. The body was thrown to the ground like garbage. Li Anping said calmly, "There is no need for an armistice agreement." He paused, and heard various voices from a few kilometers around. Then he said, "Is this Morocco? Since you are all here, don't rush to leave, all stay. It's cold here, and the bodies are easier to preserve. You can also have someone transport them back for you." Everyone looked at Li Anping in shock and anger. The Kailan king said angrily, "Arrogant." The old man said in surprise, "Is he going to fight all of us?" Yulia laughed in anger, "Old man, it seems that he is looking for death, so we can't be blamed." Mammon looked at Li Anping with a questioning face. "Li Anping, the strength you show now is indeed very strong, but it is unlikely to deal with so many of us, right? And do you know that once you start a war with us, there will be no place for you in the entire East continent?" The people of Daxia Longke also became nervous, especially Lu Sheng and others. They never thought that Li Anping would go to war with so many forces present as soon as he appeared. It was simply the rhythm of the world being the enemy. Even Yan Bei, who was arrogant, took a breath and looked at Li Anping in disbelief. In response, Li Anping did not speak. Of course, he could not tell the other party directly that after swallowing the blood demon, the Black and the Hades, his strength at this time was far beyond the other party's imagination. Now that he has understood the situation now, he chooses to explain it all directly with actions. Li Anping's figure disappeared from everyone's sight as his body started to move at full speed. In the fast-paced world, everything seemed to have stopped. But in less than a tenth of a second, when everyone reacted, countless blood flowers burst out in the entire venue at the same time. All those who could not withstand Li Anping's punch were directly blasted into countless pieces. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiang Go. Chapter 186. In an instant, the entire conference room was almost covered with plasma. Ordinary ability users were not even qualified to react, so they died directly under Li Anping's punch. When Li Anping appeared at his original position again, except for Emma and Yajiao, there were only 4 people left standing in the entire venue. They are the 3 5th-level ability users, Kylan King, Mammon, and Yulia. The 3 of them are the strongest, but the reason why they were unscathed is because Li Anping did not deal with them at all. In addition, there was an old man who was a Chi Dao. It was unknown how he resisted Li Anping's attack, and he was looking at Li Anping with a gloomy face. Seeing the blood all over the ground, the Kylan King was the first to roar angrily. He heard loud puffs of blood as he quickly grew in size, with silver scales growing all over his body, and traces of electric light kept coming out. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a half-human, half-animal monster more than 3 meters tall. Seeing that his heirs and men were killed by Li Anping in front of him, he was already furious. He looked at Li Anping with red eyes and shouted, "Go to hell!" Boom! With a sound, the Kylan King's thick fist covered with silver scales was like a cannonball, hitting Li Anping directly. The entire conference room was shaken, but except for leaving a big hole on the ground, Li Anping had disappeared. Just then, his voice came from outside the gate. "I don't want to play here, let's change the venue." Roar! Hearing Li Anping's voice, the Kylan King let out a beast's roar, and the man rushed away with a bunch of lightning. Wherever he passed, people turned on their backs, and countless walls were directly destroyed, exposing the steel bars, cement, and wires in the walls. A passage leading to the outside was created. Seeing the Kylan King rushing out, Mammon frowned and said to Yulia, "Follow the Kylan King and don't let him get carried away by his anger. It's too dangerous for him to face Li Anping alone in this state." Yulia nodded solemnly, and the next moment she rushed out of the door and disappeared into the corridor. Although Yulia is very confident in her abilities, the strength Li Anping showed just now is enough to attract her attention. After Yulia left, Mammon looked at the remaining Daxia and others present, and his mental energy slowly emanated from his body. The originally curved back straightened up, and a dangerous light emanated from his eyes. The expressions of Yajiao and the others changed, and they looked at Mammon nervously. At this moment, Emma took a step forward, and the mental energy in her body also surged high. The powerful power contained in it represented her identity as a 5th-level ability user. She knew that Li Anping left here because he didn't want to affect them. And Li Anping also asked her to protect Yajiao and the others. In addition, whether it is Li Anping's power or his favor in rescuing Emma from the underworld, it is enough for Emma to stand up at this moment. Even facing a level 5 ability user who doesn't know the depth. Mammon thought, is this woman another level 5 ability user? Yulia and Kylan King have already chased after him. The woman in front of her wanted to protect Daxia, but she couldn't get away to help Li Anping. This is better and can give us a chance to besiege Li Anping. Now is not the time to attack Daxia and this woman. So Mammon looked at Emma, snorted coldly, and then turned and left without doing anything. At the same time, he said in his mouth, "Xi and Chang He, if you want revenge, come together." Li Anping's strength. You have also seen that you can never take revenge on your own. The old man from Yukidao, whom Mammon called Xi and Changhe, looked livid, looked at the blood on the ground, and followed Mammon out in silence. Lu Sheng breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Okay, let's go out first. If so many level 5 ability users fight, we may not be able to withstand the aftermath. And this lady? My name is Emma." Emma nodded towards Yajiao and others. "We will discuss the details later. Let's go out and talk." Most people agreed and hurriedly ran out. A few people with abilities such as Sun Hao and Yan Bei were unwilling to give in. Faced with the huge gap in strength, they could only choose to evacuate first. However, Li Qian couldn't help but said to Emma, "Miss, are you a level 5 ability user? Don't worry about us. We can protect ourselves. Please go help me." "You mean Li Anping?" Emma glanced at Li Qian and walked toward the door, sighing, "If you had seen him fighting in the underworld, you wouldn't have said such things to me. That the man doesn't need help at all. The ones who really need help are those who surround him." At this moment, Mammon's loud shout suddenly came from outside the venue, "Zurong, how long are you going to pretend to be dead? You have also seen Li Anping's attitude. If you don't want to die, just besiege him with us. Success after that, you will be the next leader of the Flame Dragon Pioneer." Mammon was answered with a cold snort, and then the surrounding temperature rose sharply. It seemed that it was the hottest summer, and even most of the snow in Morocco began to melt. Hot sweat continued to appear on people's heads, and a pillar of fire appeared. It even rose into the sky, as if it was trying to completely wring out the moisture in the air. On the other side, Li Anping stepped several times in mid-air and reached several kilometers away. Behind him, a flash of lightning was chasing after him. Suddenly, Li Anping stopped on a building. The Kylin King roared and threw a punch with endless electric light, making bursts of piercing sounds, towards Li Anping's body. The electric light entangled in the Kylin King's arm, like a terrible thunder dragon. Although Li Anping's body is strong, he will still be paralyzed by electric shocks and will still be burned by high temperatures. So when facing the Kylin King's punch, he did not use his body to block it, but sent out an empty palm. The white shock wave collided with the Kylin King's thunder fist, and the latter was immediately bounced out and rolled for more than 10 meters before stopping. Li Anping stood still, looking at the Kylin King, who stood up slowly, and said lightly, "You'd better wait. If you go alone, you'll just die." After hearing what Li Anping said, the Kylin King did not continue to attack this time. Although he was still full of anger, Li Anping's empty palm and words calmed him down temporarily. He knew that the other party was right. Although Li Anping was only a 4th level ability user, the other party's strength was simply bottomless. Facing his full strength attack, it was just like facing a naughty child. The seemingly powerful empty palm was just a casual move. It is not brave for a person to rashly fight against an opponent of this level, but just to die. After all, the Kylin King has been on the battlefield for a long time. Although he faced the pain of losing his son, he still forced himself to suppress the anger in his heart. While guarding against Li Anping, he waited for the other people. They did not let Li Anping and the Kylin King wait for long. A flame shot up into the sky, and Zurong had turned into a fireman and appeared above the two of them. Next came Mammon and Xi and Changhe. Mammon had a pair of huge grey wings on his back, which looked like 2 huge hands growing on his back, and Mammon held Xi and Changhe in his right hand. Li Anping looked at the 3 level 5 ability users in front of him, as well as Xi and Changhe, a level 4 ability user, and smiled with interest. Then he turned his head and looked at a TV tower in the distance. On the TV tower, Yulia was holding a sniper rifle over 2 meters long, looking at Li Anping through the scope. When she saw Li Anping looking in her direction, her heart tightened, and she felt that her body seemed to be seen through by Li Anping at this moment. How is it possible? This place is at least 10 kilometers away from there. Can he even see this? Regardless of what Yulia thought, Li Anping showed a satisfied smile over there. How strong am I now? I hope you can give me an answer. After saying that, he raised his finger to the four people present and said, "You four, come together." Arrogant. The four people, including Xi and Chang He, all cursed in their hearts, but the next moment, it was not Kailan King, Mammon, Zhurong, or any of Xi and Chang He who launched the attack. The whole earth shook violently, and then a huge arm broke out of the ground and appeared behind Li Anping. It was made entirely of rocks and was more than 50 meters long. The size of its palm was enough to cover the roof of the entire high-rise building. The white dwarf roared, "Li Anping! Pay for the leader's life." Then this giant palm slapped Li Anping on the roof with a force that tilted the sky. This was the attack of the white dwarf, who hurried over after hearing the news that Pluto was killed. At the same time as he attacked, 9 huge fireballs that were enough to melt gold and boil iron appeared around Zhurong in the air. The Kailan King was surrounded by lightning all over his body, like a giant beast composed of thunder and lightning. The palm wings on Mammon's body suddenly opened, and a black dry giant hand emerged from the void behind him. And Yulia, who was far away on the TV tower, suddenly began to reflect the infinite changes in the future in her eyes, and the bullet in the barrel of the sniper rifle was ready to hit. At the moment when the white dwarf first slapped Li Anping with one palm, in less than 1/10 of a second, the other 4 level 5 ability users present had already used their abilities and vowed to kill the madman on the spot. They were full of confidence in their hearts. They believed that there could not be any ability user in the world who could face the siege of 5 level 5 ability users. The 5 peerless strong men joined forces, and they had the courage to fight even their current opponent, the leader of the Star Alliance. But facing this powerful force that was enough to subvert a country, facing this terrible offensive that was enough to defeat all armies head-on, Li Anping just grinned. The next moment, the whole world seemed to slow down, whether it was the burning flames, the falling giant palms, or the electric sparks in the air. Everything in this world was caught in slow motion at this moment. Transcending all sounds and colors, Li Anping entered a speed that ordinary people could hardly imagine at this moment. It turned out that on the day of the launch, the management function of the VIP chapters would not be opened until the afternoon, and only then could the VIP chapters be uploaded. This is really a tragedy. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 187. A punch was thrown towards the sky. Silently, the surging force had already hit the giant palm that fell from the sky. The huge arm made of stone instantly turned into countless broken stones and fell to the ground. But at the moment when the stone slowly fell, Li Anping's figure flashed and appeared behind the Kailan King. His fist broke through layers of air, splashing ripples, and the invisible fist force had already hit the Kailan King's vest. However, as an old-fashioned 5th level ability user, the Kailan King was indeed unique. In a flash of lightning, under this rapid attack of Li Anping, he actually relied on his experience and instinct to punch his back in advance. The fist and the fist force collided, and the Kailan King had already flown out with huge kinetic energy. Li Anping looked at the Kailan King unexpectedly. Although the other party was the most likely person among the 5-level ability users in front of him to approach him in terms of reaction with the ability of Kailan blood, he did not expect that the other party could actually block his punch like this. But when he saw the expressionless face and blank eyes of the Kailan King, he understood. No thinking and reaction, just relying on the instinct formed after decades of fighting, plus the electric current stimulation control. Interesting. Thinking of this, Li Anping stepped heavily and rushed towards the retreating Kailan King. During his step, the whole high-rise building banged and creaked under the heavy load, and the building began to collapse from the top. However, the speed of the building collapse was too slow for Li Anping. He had already arrived in front of the Kailan King and punched him in the face. With this punch, another white fist force. or an air shockwave hit the Kylan King. With a bang, the fist was blocked again. But the Kylan King also paid a heavy price. The palm of his hand that blocked this attack was completely twisted and deformed. But the Kylan King still looked confused. Or rather, his brain had no time to react to the pain, and his other palm had already accelerated with the electric current, and instinctively hit Li Anping's ribs. Unfortunately, even so, his speed was far inferior to Li Anping's. Li Anping's attack was easily dodged by a wrong step, and then Li Anping punched him in the stomach from a distance. The terrifying force directly shattered the internal organs of the Kylan King, and the scales on the surface of the body also fell off, splashing everywhere. Li Anping had beaten the Kylan King to death with 3 consecutive punches. But the death of the Kylan King was not meaningless. He bought time for several other ability users, allowing them to finally react. Zhu Rong was the first to launch the attack. He was knocked away by Li Anping twice, and he knew how terrifying the other party was. Especially now, in the blink of an eye, the Kylan King had died, and with the collapse of the roof, he fell to the ground together. So he made a move. It was full strength. After 9 huge fireballs broke through the air and attacked Li Anping, terrible heat rolled in, and it was not close yet. The collapsed building was already emitting billowing green smoke. If these 9 fireballs exploded at the same time, I'm afraid the entire Morocco would be reduced to ashes in this blow. When Li Anping killed the Kylan King with 3 punches, Mammon and Xi and Changhe's faces had changed. They became more solemn, but when Zhu Rong used this move, they were even more shocked, not only because Zhu Rong's move was extremely dangerous, but also because this attack even included them in the attack range. At this moment, Mammon's wings behind him flapped hard, dragging Xi and Changhe back quickly. The two felt that their skin had begun to sting unbearably, and a wave of heat came to their faces, making them dry and thirsty. But the next moment, Li Anping's response made them even more dumbfounded. Facing the 9 fireballs coming towards him, Li Anping threw 9 consecutive punches at the sky, and each punch brought visible fluctuations in the air. 9 consecutive punches, each punch directly blew out a pseudo-vacuum space in the air, directly extinguishing the fireballs. And with the huge force exploding in the air, even after the flames were extinguished, the vibrations caused by the explosion still spread in all directions. The first to be hit were the 5 surrounding buildings, which collapsed like a sand castle on the beach as if they were slapped by an invisible giant palm. The stone giant hand controlled by the white dwarf in the air originally wanted to reshape and grab Li Anping again, but it was also directly shattered by these 9 consecutive punches, turning into a large pile of sand and stones falling to the ground. Seeing this, both Zhu Rong and Mammon showed fear on their faces. With pure power, the destructive power that caused this effect, let alone seen, had never been heard of. Especially Zhu Rong, he had experienced Li Anping's vacuum circle before, but he didn't expect that after he raised the temperature to the extreme, the other party could still easily extinguish his flames, and both his demeanor and movements looked more comfortable and relaxed than last time. Mammon first screamed, flapped his wings violently, and flew away with Xi and Changhe. At this moment, he had realized that the monsters in the past could not be defeated by force, and could only be defeated by wits. On the other side, Zhu Rong's trick was broken, and he had a similar reaction. His body was flashing with fire, and in a blink of an eye, he had flown hundreds of meters away. In mid-air, Li Anping looked at the 2 people fleeing and smiled coldly. With a step, he came to a steel bar falling in mid-air. In the rapid state, the world was almost still, and he could even see the steel bars and cement falling inch by inch. So he pulled out a steel drill from it and pointed the steel drill in the direction of Zhu Rong. Boom! The atmosphere was broken, and a black lightning seemed to appear in mid-air. When Zhu Rong heard the whistling sound of the air, a large transparent hole appeared in his chest. As for the iron drill, It had already turned into dust under the dual effects of Li Anping's huge power and Zhu Rong's protective flame. But Li Anping's power was truly transmitted to Zhu Rong. That's why a hole was opened directly in his chest. Zhu Rong looked at the big hole in his chest in disbelief. Fear, despair, regret, all kinds of emotions came one after another. At this moment, death is so scary, and Zhu Rong's eyes reveal infinite regret. If he had known this, how could he go against Li Anping? But it's too late to know this now. The last bright firelight flashed, and the second sun seemed to rise in the sky. Zhu Rong's body was reduced to ashes in this light. The heat and shock wave caused by the explosion directly reduced several blocks to ashes. A scorched earth was left in the center of Morocco. Countless people died without any warning. Fortunately, Zhu Rong exploded at a high altitude, otherwise the power of this blow would have been even more terrifying. See this sight. Mammon became even more frightened. He felt as if his heart was being pinched by death. He flapped his wings hard and his body accelerated again. "You're running away now," Li Anping's voice came from behind him, making Mammon's face turn pale with shock. He continued to fly without looking back, and a massive amount of thought energy was ejected from behind, making his body accelerate again. "The speed is good, but let's stop." At the same time as he heard these words, Mammon felt as if his neck was grabbed by an iron claw. The body that was flying rapidly stopped in an instant. The huge force almost broke his neck. "Yulia," Mammon roared, and in fear and anger, 4 huge black arms stretched out from the void around him, grabbing at his back. Li Anping looked at the 4 arms grabbing at him. Each of these 4 arms was the size of a strong man. They were all dark and looked very dry on the surface, like tree bark. The most amazing thing is that their roots seem to come from broken spaces. It's like being summoned from another world. Li Anping had a look of curiosity on his face, let go of Mammon, and grabbed one of the arms, but he exerted a little force. But he found that he couldn't tear off the arm. This is Mammon's ability, the grasp of the void. Summoning unknown things from another world, the power of these black arms is about 10 tons. This is nothing. The most important thing is that these arms cannot be damaged, no matter what kind of attack. The arms are all intact. The next moment, Li Anping's other hand and both feet had been grasped by the void grip. The roots of the void grip are fixed in the space channel. It has the characteristic of being indestructible and can be regarded as one of the most powerful defense and control skills. At the moment when Li Anping was temporarily controlled, maybe the next second, the next moment when Li Anping could break free, Yulia, who was far away on the TV tower, seized this golden opportunity and aimed the sniper rifle. The mirror pointed at Li Anping's head, then his hands, feet, and heart. This was caused by Li Anping's underestimation of the enemy and the special abilities of those with Mammon abilities. Maybe there won't be this wonderful opportunity again in the next few years or decades. 6 shots in a row, all completed within 1 second, directly emptied the sniper rifle's magazine. The 6 bullets carried powerful kinetic energy and terrifying mental energy, rushed out of the barrel, and then appeared directly on Li Anping's body surface like teleportation. They actually passed directly through the space and passed through the mental energy. Protection appears outside Li Anping's body. Here is Yulia's ability, a sure hit gun. As long as it is aimed at the target, the bullet will definitely hit. No matter how fast the target moves, it cannot avoid the bullet. This is why the alliance leader sent Mammon to cooperate with Yulia. The combined abilities of these 2 people are far greater than the effect of 1 + 1 = 2. There were 6 consecutive bang 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 sounds, and the special bullets carrying the mind energy directly smashed Li Anping's head and broke all his limbs. The most terrifying thing was that a long stream of blood mist erupted from Li Anping's chest, and a bloody hole the size of his head appeared in his chest. Yulia's pupils shrank slightly when she saw Li Anping's injuries. The 6 bullets just now, if anyone else had been hit by one, would have torn his body into pieces, but now Li Anping was only beaten into pieces. He was seriously injured, which shows how powerful his body is. Yulia also fired 6 bullets in a row because she knew how powerful Li Anping's gun was. This was her full strength. She was pale at the moment, but she smiled. This monster, however, it was a near miss. Just as she was thinking this, Yulia's expression suddenly changed as she looked at the scope. She picked up the magazine on the side and started changing bullets. As for Li Anping, without his head and his limbs disconnected, his torso suddenly began to struggle violently. Then the soul-sucking ability suddenly activated, and within a second, all ordinary people 600 meters around were killed in an instant. This is the city center of Morocco. Tens of thousands of people were killed in an instant, and countless soul powers were sucked into Li Anping's body. Bones, nerves, muscles, and then the epidermis. Li Anping's limbs grew out at a speed visible to the naked eye. The flesh on his chest was constantly squeezed and deformed, and the wound became smaller and smaller. And Li Anping's head, bones and muscles have fully grown. His zombie-like head looks ferocious, and his mouth is wide open, making an angry roar. Roar. Roar, 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 roar. Mammon and his attacks not only did not really hurt Li Anping, but completely angered the other party. To be continued. Please search Ocean Literature. The novels are better and updated faster. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xianglang Go. Chapter 188. The air was hissing and the earth was shaking. Mammon was shocked and looked at the monster in front of him in disbelief. He knew that Li Anping had the ability to regenerate super fast, but he didn't expect that he could recover in an instant after suffering such a serious injury. Absolute strength and speed, and this regeneration ability, is he really a level 4 ability user? However, Mammon is an old-fashioned level 5 ability user after all. He did not hesitate at this critical moment. He activated his ability again, and dozens of arms emerged from the void around Li Anping and grabbed his body. Then these arms from another world dragged Li Anping into the void. It was like countless evil spirits grabbed Li Anping and wanted to drag him to hell. This is Mammon's ability, another use of the void grip. It can exile powerful enemies to another world. As for which other world it is, Mammon himself doesn't know. Anyway, it's not the same planet. Anyway, he has never seen anyone who was exiled to another world come back. Seeing Li Anping's body being dragged into the void inch by inch, his expression became more ferocious, and his angry roar directly shattered all the glass of the nearby buildings. The next moment, Li Anping's arms and legs shook violently, and the strong wind exploded, not only blowing down several small buildings around him, but also directly shaking away all the huge palms that grabbed him, breaking away from the control of the void grip. The power of the void grip was far inferior to him. Just now, it just relied on the characteristics of being indestructible and the roots fixed in the space-time channel, making it difficult to move, to temporarily lock Li Anping. Once Li Anping understood, no longer tearing the void grip, but directly shaking him away. This thing can't control him at all. At the moment when Li Anping broke free from the void grip, Mammon realized that the attack failed. He threw Xi and Changhe to Li Anping, and then he shouted, and around his body, layers of endless arms emerged from the void. On the other side, after being thrown out, Xi and Changhe had no time to curse, and he had no ability to fly. He had to hold his head with both hands and rushed towards Li Anping with his eyes closed. Li Anping didn't even look at him. He directly hit Xi and Changhe's arm with a fist. The latter's face turned pale, but he was unharmed. Instead, he took the opportunity to get close to Li Anping and hugged him. Li Anping looked at him coldly, and in an instant, dozens of punches were hit on Xi and Changhe's body in no particular order. His body was hit from head to toe and was dented everywhere. But except for the deformation of his body, there was no injury at all. This finally caused Li Anping's doubts. But this doubt was instantly washed away by the rage of the serious injury. Since dozens of punches can't kill you, then hundreds of punches, thousands of punches, tens of thousands of punches. Li Anping's hands brought a series of after-images to hit Xian Changhe, who looked like he was being attacked by hundreds of fists. The sound of dense fists and guns colliding sounded in the air, and the wind pressure formed by the fists blew up storms in the air. Xian Changhe had no way to resist such a terrifying close-range attack. He could only hold his head tightly and resist it. Xian Changhe's ability is to absorb kinetic energy. The power of fists. The power of legs, bullets, bombs, all attacks. He can absorb the opponent's kinetic energy and make the opponent's attack invalid. It was also with this ability that he dared to catch up and wanted to surround and kill Li Anping with several other level 5 ability users. After all, Li Anping killed his grandson Xian Long. Mammon also knew his ability, so he threw him over to stop Li Anping. But in just a few seconds, Xian Changhe didn't know how many punches Li Anping had hit, he just felt that his body was getting bigger and bigger, and the kinetic energy absorbed had far exceeded the limit of the past. Bang! Xian Changhe's body finally couldn't stand the endless kinetic energy absorption, and it exploded directly, turning into countless fragments and scattering in all directions. Blood and flesh also splashed on Li Anping's body, but he just quickly dodged the blood and flesh and continued to rush towards Mammon. Mammon over there took advantage of Xian Changhe's delay to directly summon hundreds of black giant palms of the void grip, trying to wrap up his entire body directly. Countless giant palms overlapped and wrapped together, forming a huge black sphere that kept shrinking, and just a little bit was needed to protect Mammon. By then, relying on the indestructible nature of the void grip, even if facing Li Anping, he might be able to hold on for a long time. If it were someone else, he would have succeeded, but unfortunately he was facing Li Anping. He may be the fastest man in the world at present. A black figure swept by at a speed that was difficult to distinguish with the naked eye, and Li Anping rushed directly to Mammon. The black void grip kept closing. The speed of closing was only a moment in the eyes of ordinary people, but in the eyes of Li Anping at full speed, it had given him enough time to break through. Li Anping passed through the gaps that were about to close, like a black lightning that pierced through the black sphere formed by the void grip. When he appeared in midair again, he had a heart in his hand that was still struggling and beating. The heart was Mammon's heart. At the last moment before the void grip closed, Li Anping rushed in and grabbed his heart out. In just a moment, even when Mammon's heart was exposed to the air, it still kept beating as if it was in the atrium. The next moment, the sphere formed by the void grip finally closed completely, leaving no gap, but what he was protecting now was just a dead body. Crushing the heart in his hand, Li Anping stomped his feet violently, and the air wave rose up. In the raging hurricane, he had appeared several kilometers away. Then he stepped on the void again and appeared above the TV tower. However, Yulia's position was empty, leaving only a 2-meter-long special sniper rifle. As early as Li Anping broke free from the void grip, she chose to escape. Hiding her mind and blending into the crowd, even Li Anping couldn't find him for a while. Roar! The furious roar resounded throughout Morocco. The passers-by on the ground looked at the direction of the roar with fear on their faces. They could see that the TV tower was twisted and squeezed by invisible forces. Li Anping punched from top to bottom. He directly used his fist to slap the entire TV tower into a pancake. At this time, the continuous killing increased Li Anping's strength by 5.1. Speed increased by 4.8, and physical fitness increased by 5.6. The overall quality reached 28.0 in strength, 26.6 in speed, and 29.4 in physical fitness. If there is a god in this world, then this is a number that would make the god tremble. In the combat command room of the ice castle, everyone held their breath and watched the satellite live broadcast from the big screen. When they learned that all the members of the Flame Dragon Pioneer in the conference room had turned into a pile of minced meat, all the leaders present felt their hearts twitching. When they saw that the Kylan King was beaten to death by Li Anping with a few punches, they gasped and began to think about the safety of the command room. When Ivan too saw Zhu Rong being killed, he was so angry that he fainted. "Your Majesty! Protect your Majesty and leave. Commander! The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Armored Divisions are all ready. Are you going to attack?" Let them come back quickly. No one is allowed to open fire without my order. Rescuing the people is the top priority. The commander looked at Li Anping's demonic methods on the screen and murmured, "This battle no longer belongs to us." When he said this, everyone in the command room seemed to be relieved. In a panic, the royal family and nobles began to withdraw from the command room and even from Morocco. The troops that rushed over were also quickly driven away. Avoid a head-on collision with Li Anping and others. On the other side, in the underground shelter, the representatives of the 9 royal families were anxiously waiting for the result. Li Wei, the head of the Li family, was pale. Every time the earth shook and the explosions came from afar, he couldn't help but shiver a few times. And beside him, the other Gao family and Qian family. The leaders of the Song family and other families were all like dogs that had lost their homes, panicking. Finally, Li Wei stood up and slammed the table. "We can't wait like this. A gentleman should not stand under a dangerous wall. Let's leave here and return to Tianjin." The high-ranking people next to him all echoed, wishing they had wings and could leave this place quickly. Wang Chong glanced at them coldly. "What kind of people are you like now? If he really wins, do you think you can get away by returning to Tianjin? Wait for the result here quietly, don't lose the last bit of dignity of the royal family." Li Wei said viciously, "Wang Chong, do you think you will be fine if he wins? Don't forget that you have also been fueling the flames during this period." Then the two sides quarreled hysterically under tremendous pressure. Seeing the chaos in the shelter, Zhang Yanhan on the side showed a hint of sneer. A few days later, Li Anping came back to life and brutally killed 4 level 5 users, including Pluto, Zhurong, Mammon, and Kylan King, at the Morocco conference. The level 5 user Yulia of the Star Alliance and the only remaining level 5 user, White Dwarf, of the Flame Dragon Pioneer, were defeated by Li Anping's fierce power and all fled. In addition, there were a large number of Flame Dragon Pioneers, and hundreds of users from large and small countries such as Baiyu, Yingxi, and Dongyang all died under Li Anping's fist. In front of Li Anping's absolute power, Ivan too had to lower his proud head and announce the dissolution of the Flame Dragon Pioneer. Although most of the users in it had been killed by Li Anping. After that, Li Anping left Morocco in a mess and returned to Tianjin with his men. The news of the whole incident spread to all the East and West continents in just a few days. When most of the senior officials received this news, they first showed disbelief. Then, countless videos of Li Anping fighting with others on that day were repeatedly watched and verified. Intelligence personnel from various countries and organizations also became busy, constantly verifying the accuracy of the news. Testing the attitudes of other countries. Everyone was also waiting for the Star Alliance to take action, and even looking forward to whether the world's strongest queen would take action in the face of Li Anping's naked slap in the face. They speculated that if Li Anping, who could defeat 6 level 5 ability users single-handedly, faced the world's #1 level 6 ability user, who would win and who would lose. Not only that, the death of more than 4 level 5 ability users caused an impact that was like a worldwide earthquake. Ice Castle, Daxia, the southern countries, the overseas island countries, and the Federation of the Western Continent, the Codex Kingdom, and Tyrell. In the eyes of ordinary people, the world is still the same as before, but the undercurrent hidden under the surface is already surging. When everyone was shocked by Li Anping's strength and the countries in the East continent were worried about the loss of the ability user, an even more shocking news came from Tianjin. Li Enping, he announced the existence of the ability user to all the people of Daxia and said that he would participate in the imperial election of Daxia this year. He wants to be the emperor? Is he crazy? This is what everyone thought after hearing these two news. In a street bar in the territory of the Code, the tall and blonde queen was sitting at the bar at this time. She held a wine glass in one hand and looked at the TV with a pair of eyes, which was reporting the news. The men around her looked at her greedily. It seemed that she was the center of the bar at this moment. The eager look made people wonder if they would pounce on her the next moment. Unfortunately, several men who thought they were quite charming had tried to approach her, but they were all coldly rejected. Finally, another handsome man with a delicate appearance, who looked a bit like a star from the Code country, stood up and walked towards the bar in the spotlight of everyone. He put the wine glass on the bar and smiled, which he thought was quite charming. "Miss, can I sit here?" The queen looked at him with interest, and before she spoke, she suddenly looked at the TV, and the president's live interview began. The man didn't realize that the woman in front of him had focused all her attention on the TV, and he asked again, "Excuse me." Before he finished speaking, the queen replied coldly, "Get lost." The man's face changed, and he was angry and embarrassed. When he was about to get angry, his eyes suddenly became blurred, and he put down the wine money and walked out of the bar straight. He will go back home to sleep and forget everything that happened in the bar today. The Queen's eyes were always fixed on the president on TV. "We strongly condemn the terrorist attack by Daxia in Morocco and the inaction of the Ice Castle government." A series of long and boring political speeches began, but the Queen watched with great interest. Especially when she saw the president's face suddenly change, the corners of her mouth curled up. Then she saw the president's eyes roll back on the TV, and then he pounced on the camera. The camera fell to the ground, and only a pair of messy footsteps, as well as the screams of women and the screams of men could be seen. The next moment, the live camera was cut back to the studio. When she saw this, the Queen had walked out of the bar and onto the street. She had a satisfied smile on her face, and the city in front of her was reflected in her pupils, but unlike the bustling city night scene, the city reflected in her pupils seemed to be wrapped in endless flames. At this moment, the phone rang, and the Queen answered the phone and frowned. "I understand. Genhai is at a critical juncture of breakthrough. Don't let him know about this for the time being. Control Yulia and White Dwarf. Wait for me to come back and ask them in person." To be continued. Please search Ocean Literature. The novels are better and updated faster. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xionglang Go. Chapter 189. Daxia, 7 o'clock in the evening. More than 50% of the people gathered in front of the TV. According to the previous government notice, a policy that will affect the lives of everyone in the entire Great Xia will be implemented today. The next second, all public TV channels started broadcasting the same content live at this moment. First, Lururuo, a beautiful host familiar to the people of Daxia, appeared in front of the TV screen. With her amazing upper body lines and gorgeous appearance, she has become popular for most of the summer in recent years. But at this moment, Lururuo was extremely nervous. All because of the man sitting next to her. Although she didn't know what position the other party held in the government, just the tip of the iceberg that appeared on the TV station during this period, whether it was the station director who became submissive, or the appearance of various military and police forces, made her aware of what was happening in front of her. Men are anything but simple. When the live broadcast started, Lururuo immediately put aside all distracting thoughts and showed a smile on his face. "Hello dear viewers, today we have the honor to invite the leader of the Special Forces, General Li. He will answer some questions about superpowers for us today." After saying the word superpower, Lururuo felt a little unbelievable. Not to mention the ordinary viewers in front of the TV. Most of them began to wonder whether this was a new entertainment program, and some people cursed it on the spot. But there are also some special people who have a strange look in their eyes. He looked on quietly. The camera switched to next to Lururuo, and Li Anping appeared in the shot. He didn't have any prelude and just started talking about what he wanted to express today. I am Li Anping, the leader of the Daxia Special Service Team, also known as the Daxia Dragon Bird. This force is Daxia's superpower force. What I want to do today is to announce the existence of superpowers to all of you. Just this sentence. There has been an uproar in front of the TV. At this moment, the ratings of all TV stations began to rise sharply. Never before have so many people been watching TV. The camera turned to Lururuo on the side, and she started asking questions according to the director's instructions. Hello General Li, what are the so-called superpowers? Superpower is power beyond ordinary people. I'll let a person with the ability demonstrate it. After saying that, the camera turned to the side again, and Qianduoduo appeared in front of the screen in a wheelchair. I saw all kinds of props rolling around him. Flying. There are many ability users in Daxia Longke, and several candidates were originally selected to demonstrate abilities, but in the end, considering the acceptance and popularity of the ability, Qianduoduo's telekinesis was finally chosen. At the same time, Li Anping's voice came from the TV. This is telekinesis, a very well-known ability. In addition to fire, freezing, lightning, and flight, the types of abilities are almost endless. Maybe every months, every week. New abilities are born every day. Lururuo asked, then how many ability users are there in this world? I don't know about it worldwide, but here in Daxia, according to conservative estimates, there are about 10,000 to 20,000 ability users, and this number is still increasing year by year. Maybe there are ability users right next to you. It's just that you don't know, that's all. Lururuo smiled and then asked, then you don't know the purpose of this live TV broadcast? Li Anping replied, we believe that the existence of people with abilities no longer needs to be concealed. As the times progress, human beings become more and more enlightened. We can completely accept the existence of people with abilities, because this itself is the history of human evolution. A kind of progress. The people have every right to know the truth. But it is also a dangerous force, so in order to better help people with abilities and let them make good use of their abilities, from now on, things about people with abilities will be completely transparent. Unless they voluntarily, they no longer need to hide the information about their abilities. Identity. Next, we will also establish a school for people with abilities to help them recognize their abilities, become familiar with their abilities, and learn how to truly control their abilities. And those of us with abilities will use our abilities to help build the country, fight crime, and make the entire country more fair and just. Next, Lururuo asked a few more innocuous questions. It wasn't that she didn't want to ask some more explosive and pointed questions, but that this live broadcast was completely out of her control. The questions asked had already been written by others. Well, all she has to do is read according to the script. Even before Li Anping arrived, the entire TV station building was surrounded by troops and inspected thoroughly. In front of the TV, no one cared about the next irrelevant issue. The existence of ability users was like a bomb, which was detonated by Li Anping. Most people don't believe this kind of thing at all. They turn off the TV and go about their business. A small number of people, especially teenagers, become excited and fantasize about having superpowers. Doubts, disbelief, doubts, longing, worries, all kinds of emotions gathered online. In major forums and portals, the topic about people with abilities has become the hottest topic. A man looked at Li Anping on TV with a look of hatred. A couple watched the live broadcast on TV. After listening to Li Anping's words, a strange look appeared in their eyes, and they looked towards their son's room. An old man was watching the live broadcast while mocking Li Anping's nonsense, but he didn't notice that their grandson, who was lying on the sofa, had a look of desire in his eyes. The world is changing, and when Li Anping's speech was broadcast, the change became more drastic. And this change has spread to countries around the world. Most countries, especially those in the Western continent, have banned Li Anping's speech. They smelled danger from Li Anping's words. The leader of the Great Xia Dragon Bird, a man who killed several level 5 ability users, made the top leaders of various countries feel dangerous, whether it was his power or his thoughts. To be continued, please search Ocean Literature. The novel is better and updated faster. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang Go. Chapter 190. 3 months later, a bright moon rose in the sky in the south of the East continent, illuminating the entire Earth. In this silent night sky, a piercing scream suddenly sounded. Then a bright spark lit up on the clouds, and the next moment, the spark became a fireball, and the bright light instantly illuminated most of the sky. It also attracted the attention of people on the ground. I saw a military base on the ground, with patrolling soldiers everywhere, dense armored vehicles, and tanks, which seemed to be armed to the teeth. But when the explosion occurred in the sky, everyone became nervous, and the base's alarm sounded through the night sky. Whether it was tanks, armored vehicles, or armed helicopters, all war machines were started and made bursts of roars. The soldiers loaded the magazines, opened the safety, and looked at the sky with a vigilant face. The anti-aircraft soldiers even picked up rockets and aimed them directly at the sky, as if they were ready to shoot at any time. Their foreheads kept sweating, and it seemed that there was an inexplicable pressure covering all the soldiers in the base. Finally, in a position that was hard to see with the naked eye, a black shadow was falling rapidly towards the center of the military base. There were a few screams in the base, and then several anti-aircraft missiles soared into the sky and shot towards the falling black shadow. But before the missile hit the target, a white light suddenly flashed in the night sky. Starting from the black shadow, a white light hundreds of meters long swept across the missile, and the missile exploded directly in the air. A huge fireball ignited in the air, illuminating the entire military base. The black shadow that fell from the sky also revealed its true appearance under the illumination of the fire. A black tight combat suit, tight and solid muscles. Black hair, black eyes, and a cold face. It was Li Anping who fell from the sky. This time, he also came to the sky above this military base on an intercontinental missile. However, this time the opponent already knew Li Anping's habits. So when he found that a missile exploded in the air, he was alert at the first time. But what's the point of this? Li Anping looked at the ground getting closer and closer under his feet. There were also soldiers on the ground who feared him, hated him, and wanted to kill him. Hundreds of rockets were fired at Li Anping in the air. Facing the oncoming attack, Li Anping just moved down quickly and dodged them all. After all, they were just rockets aimed manually. It was not easy to aim at a person in such a dark night sky, not to mention that Li Anping took the initiative to accelerate. This acceleration also made Li Anping fall to the ground first. With a loud bang, the earth cracked into countless gaps, and Li Anping finally stood in the center of the military base. What greeted him naturally could not be a warm reception, but a metal storm composed of countless bullets. It may only take a few tenths of a second for a bullet to hit the target from the gun, but this time is enough for Li Anping. He took a step forward and came to a soldier. The ferocious expression on the other's face, the look of fear in his eyes and the shell jumping in the air were all vivid. Li Anping's palm passed over the other's throat, and took away his life. He could hear the heartbeats of thousands of soldiers in the entire military camp. His mind could sense the fear of every soldier. He could repeat the previous action within a minute, let his hand pass through the throats of thousands of soldiers, and kill them all. But at this moment, he felt an emotion. It's really boring. So the next moment, Li Anping ended the game. The ability was activated, and all mortals within 600 meters died instantly. Their souls were taken in by Li Anping's body with sincere fear under the irresistible suction. Then Li Anping spent another 0.5 seconds, while activating the ability, while circling the entire military camp. So the 1-kilometer radius suddenly became silent. The shouts of killing in the previous second disappeared in silence in the next second, and the entire military base turned into a dead zone in a second. And until this moment, the shells of the first wave of bullets fired before had just fallen to the ground with their owners, making a crisp ding-dong sound. Li Anping said to the headset, "I've taken care of this. How are Yan Bei, Sun Hao, and the others? Do you need my support?" Li Qian's voice came from the headset, "The battle is still going on there. But it seems that there is no danger at present. There are not many people with special abilities in India, and the abilities of several of them are very suitable for fighting modern troops." Just as Li Anping and Li Qian were communicating, a man suddenly jumped out from the ground, and the dagger in his hand was like a poisonous snake, resigning towards Li Anping's crotch. At the same time, a figure also emerged from the shadows, close at hand, and pointed the pistol at Li Anping's vest. And on Li Anping's left, the evil wind blew in his face, and a monster with long hair all over his body, which looked like an orangutan, also pounced on Li Anping at the same time. The three of them are obviously people with special abilities, so they can avoid being sucked away by Li Anping's ability and die. But facing the desperate struggle of the three people, Li Anping just shook his body slightly. It was such a simple shaking of the body, and it was like a hurricane was set off around him. In the blast, the two people on the ground flew out directly, and when they fell to the ground, they had stopped breathing. If you check their bodies, you will find that their internal organs and bones have all been shaken into powder. The person under Li Anping's feet was not only hit, but also stepped on by Li Anping. There was a muffled sound from the ground, and the body of the attacker had turned into a ball of meat and sank more than 10 meters underground. When Li Anping walked a few meters, a stream of blood gushed out from the place where he stepped. A series of sneak attacks and counter-attacks took only a few seconds, but in these few seconds, Li Anping didn't even look at these people. It felt like slapping a few flies to death. He was even still talking to Li Qian, and Li Qian didn't know that just a few seconds ago, Li Anping was attacked. Li Anping nodded, "I understand." Has the Yingxi government responded? They still protested and strongly resisted Daxia's terrorist acts. They would never surrender even if they were defeated to the last soldier at this point, Li Qian smiled, but privately, they have expressed to Wang Chong several times that they are willing to submit and completely obey Daxia's rule. But they can't say this openly in the country, otherwise they may be overthrown. Li Anping snorted, "Politicians." Li Qian continued to report, "Also, Lu Sheng asked you to go back quickly. The rest of the Yingxi side can be left to Sun Hao and others. After all, after the death of King Kailan, there are no level 5 ability users in the southern countries, and it is not worth it for you to go out in person. In addition, the envoy sent by the Star Alliance will arrive in Tianjing tomorrow. It has been confirmed that the person who came is a person with ability named Solomon. Lu Sheng is worried that Emma is not enough to stay in Tianjing alone, so please go back quickly." Got it? Li Anping nodded, and suddenly turned his head and looked deeply in several directions in the military base. There were several people with special abilities hiding there, but they were already dominated by fear in the corners. When Li Anping turned his eyes towards them, they couldn't help but tremble. They had lost their courage and the ability to fight against Li Anping. With a loud bang, Li Anping had already brought a wave of air to the north. At the same time, it also announced the end of his trip to southern Xinjiang this week. Since Li Anping returned to Tianjing from Morocco 3 months ago, the whole of Daxia, and even the East continent, has begun to experience a huge change. First, he wanted to inform the world of the existence of people with special abilities, and then he conducted a census of people with special abilities in Daxia and recorded them in the archives. There was also the establishment of a school for people with special abilities. This was all on the surface. In secret, all 9 royal families obeyed Lianping and integrated most of the people with special abilities. Most of the original patriarchs of the 9 royal families have been placed under house arrest. Lianping found some younger and more obedient people in their tribe to serve him. With Lianping's invincible power and the accumulated resources of the 9 royal families for hundreds of years, the great Xia dragon bird truly radiated amazing brilliance, growing like a giant tree. More than 100,000 peripheral personnel and more than 500 main combat ability users. This force is like a terrifying monster, exerting amazing power under Lianping's hands. Various civilian ability user organizations were swept away, countless ability user criminals were arrested, and the entire Tianjing even achieved a zero crime rate under Lianping's command. Because as long as a crime occurs in Tianjing, Lianping will hear it, and then rush to stop it with superhuman speed. This is also a positive propaganda for superpowers. Let ordinary people be more accepting of superpowers. And all this is just the beginning of Lianping's plan. To be continued, please search for Piaotian literature. The novel is better and updated faster.